This one was always funny to me because it was in every single one of my LCS contracts. It's like you must not present yourself as naked in any photo and any video, and I thought that was always so funny because it's like that's
Okay.
why do you have to have that on a
It's
contract?
doomed.
But it was blatantly on there. It says you are not allowed to be nude on any photography, no video, like
No,
um
no softcore, no
yeah.
hardcore, no nothing.
Yeah,
It's not.
exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Salt Mine. We are back for a quick little off-season update before we get into the roster breakdowns for 2024. My name's Gordo. I am joined, as always, by TDS and by special guest, North American Challengers League veteran, LCS veteran, Academy veteran, Proving Grounds qualifiers, Proving Grounds NACL qualifiers, and now finally NACL. Allorim, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, man. I've been around the block a little bit, huh? The way you presented me.
Yeah, you know, now
Yeah.
that I think about it, right, I think you got to be like the only guy who's played in all of those, right? I don't think the LCS is really the big one that sets it up from the
Yeah,
bulk.
I even played in like the old NACS
Yeah,
before it was Academy.
yeah,
Yeah, I
like
think I remember, like, I think you were part of one of the rosters I'm not sure if it was 2016, 2017, of one of the, maybe GCS, GCU, I think could have been called at the time. I need to go back, but I feel like I've seen you in one of those rosters.
I was not on Gold Coin United.
Okay.
you're on Team Gates, right?
I was
The
Team
original
Gates.
creator org.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was Team Gates, and then I guess before that I was on Delta Fox since I had won the OQ with them.
Mm, gotcha. So yeah, lot of history
It's a
there.
while.
So you've been through pretty much every iteration of NA T3 and T2 that we've had coming on through here. For anybody who's been under a rock who didn't tune into the promotion tournament after our last episode, Allorim did qualify for NACL for 2024 alongside Mirage Alliance. Want to talk about that a little bit? Like, what's it like to finally requalify for T2? It's been a while. It's been since it was Academy, since you were in
Right.
the distinction between T2 and T3 has gotten blurrier over the years. But since you've been kind of in the official T2 league, I know you've spoken previously that it's not all about like one track, LCS or bust for you anymore. But
Yeah.
what's it like to be back at that T2 level?
I knew at least when they announced that they're going to be doing qualifiers for it and that there are going to be relegations and promotions, I knew it was only a matter of time before I made it back because like I I think it was kind of obvious like I'm at least tier 2 level if not, tier 1 level. At least I was in the past. And so once they announced that, it's like, oh well, if you can qualify for the academy level play, then yeah, I'm gonna make it back there eventually if I wanted to. So being back in the tier 2, I mean, it's felt like it was just inevitable. It was just going to happen. I'm not. It's to me, I'm not like, oh, finally, like it's the greatest day of my life. It's just like, okay, here's the competition I was playing in before, and here I am playing again. Um, I enjoy doing it, so I'm just gonna keep doing it. But I think the only real surprise to me would be if I ever went back to LCS. But being back to tier 2 was no surprise to me.
I'm kind of curious as well with how the promotion tournament went, because obviously speaking about how like you requalified on the South Mine, we did the predictions. Pretty much everyone was in the consensus that Mirage Alliance was going to qualify. Like that was the pretty consistent opinion here. But I'm kind of curious with how the tournament went, because everyone put your first hits. We thought you were going to qualify straight up. Nothing
Yeah.
weird was going to happen, and then it was at the last day, nail biter after nail biter, until you guys were able to qualify. And I'm kind of curious how like the whole experience went by and how you saw the qualification of Lit, because I feel like that was a team nobody expected anything out of.
So I remember our matchup against Lit. I think they had a really good read on the meta. I remember I talked about this before. I don't remember who it was with, but they were doing extreme priority on Caitlyn, and we weren't at the time. And so we had just gotten smacked by Rockboot and Caitlyn multiple times in that series. And coming into the next matches, we started doing the Caitlyn stuff, and it worked really well for us. Also, Dark and I have a really bad track history against Dragoon Kisno. We can never seem to beat those guys. Dragoon's champ pool is very good into mine. Him and Quacker, like the Darius Olaf players, they have really good champ pools into mine, and then I don't know what it is about Kisno that once the Zenjiao comes out, we're lost. But that roster, or at least that iteration, we had struggles with before, because before it was lit, it was oh man, there was another roster. I can't remember what team it was.
Well,
but
they were
qualified.
Supernova before they were lit. If it's still Dragoon
That's right.
Kisno.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It was Supernova. We had lost to them in the previous OQ as well. And that's the one when we were on TFT with Red and
Mhm.
and so
Oh yeah.
and yeah, so we had lost a series against them too, and we just can't beat those guys, I guess. But afterwards, like I don't think we played our best in the promotion series. I think we were doing really well. I think our peak of that season was the second qualifier tournament, where we had won, then we went 5-0 in the Swiss bracket. You just sometimes you have ups and downs. It's hard to say why exactly we sometimes play poorly, and there was a lot of the Mirage Alliance first game of the day because our players wake up too late, kind of thing, like sleepy boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes there's just ups and downs for it. But as for the lit series, I think we got draft capped every single game, and then they showed us the way for how we should have drafted for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, definitely maybe had some
worked.
favorable drafts against the Supernova series as well, especially as you guys got towards the back half there. So all works out. All's well that ends well. That parlays into something else that we're gonna mix in. We're gonna talk with Allorim here about what's going on, but we're also gonna mix in some of that off-season news that we've gotten so far. One of those is gonna be that relegation is out the window once again, at least a little bit, as Supernova is coming right back into the league. They now find themselves on their third owner in about a year, so fun stuff going on over in the Supernova house, and they are coming back into the league with like a rumored pretty strong roster. It's I'm hearing new ownership brings with it some money. I'm hearing top 5 spenders at least in the league. I hear in top 3 a little bit, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, kind of open question here. Curious what folks are thinking about Supernova getting back into the league here, and the roster they're sort of starting to build here a little bit. Not to get too deep into rosters, but their situation all in all.
I mean, I think it's pretty funny that this is like just the third time in a row, and some would say it's a little weird that they get relegated and it's just we're coming straight back, rather than like I guess some runner-ups or people who've been around, or actually maybe even one of the collegiate teams that were doing really well, like Winthrop or something like that. I don't hate it though. It's really not. I don't think it's like my concern as to who they let into the league. Like no matter who is in the league, I'm going to be playing against them. On the Mirage side. So yeah, they're back. I mean, they get relegated again, then we get the laugh again, I guess. Which would be very funny. Honestly, that would be the almost best case scenario is fourth time.
Yeah, I do think I was
It'd be
super.
very funny.
I was pretty outspoken when they let like DSG in, that it's like I don't really love the precedent of just giving away spots. This one.
Mm-hmm.
Ostensibly a little bit more justifiable because Supernova was third in promotions, right? They lost to you guys in the final promotion matchup. That does place them third. So
right.
you could say that it was given out based on
that they were the runner-up.
Yeah, based on promotion tournament. Now, if another creator org had rolled up and been like, "Hey, we want the spot," would they have just gotten it for free? Maybe, maybe not. Who really knows? But that's at least a little bit more justifiable. I don't know. What are your thoughts, TDS?
Well, we don't know if it was for free, right? Like, technically speaking, we don't know if DSG didn't pay any money
Oh,
up
you think they're
front
getting
just in
charged?
case. Like, maybe that was part of some deal or anything like that. I'm not, like, to a certain degree so worried about the relegation or promotion part of it, just because, like, my logic always falls behind the part of I want to see the rosters that they bring in, and if they still are willing to put in rosters that I'm willing to watch, then I'm fine with the orcs staying. Now, hopefully, that orc also brings with them consistency, and they don't screw their players over, and they don't screw their NA scene over. Like, that's my particular logic behind it, because what I want is development going forward, both in the players and in the organizations. And it doesn't really matter the name that is in front; it's more so how they manage things all around, especially with how the tier 2 is in and is, because it's been so completely hectic for so long, where you have the orgs forced to have the rosters, then they vote unanimously to drop the rosters or try and keep some things like that. You have to restructure everything, and for that I think that you have to be a bit lax with how you manage certain things, not necessarily in a lot of situations, but I do think that opening up a bit with how you manage some work or some positions, I think it's fair enough, especially for this moment where there's still a bit of restructuring that needs to go forward. Also, with the LCS changing to 8 teams, you have to keep on considering multiple things. So I think that as far as now, I'm fine with how they are doing. Now, the main question will be for moving forward into the second half of 2024 and then 2025 is, are they going to keep this sort of things up, or are they going to keep on adding changes that become much more consistent and positive for the league?
Yeah, that's a big question as well. And you do bring up the consolidation of the LCS there, reducing down to 8 teams. I think a big subject, I saw a lot of discussion on like Twitter or Reddit that's like, man, the NACL is going to be so stacked this season because of those teams disbanding. I think we've seen a little bit of that. Like I think it's DSG, right, that's running the Surdy Perry roster.
Yep.
At least
No, it's
rumored.
FlyQuest.
Oh, FlyQuest. Yeah, FlyQuest is
30
running
is
this.
FlyQuest,
You're
yep.
completely correct. Surdy is running.
DSG is tenacity.
Yeah,
Yep.
DSG's Tenacity. Yeah, so it looks like yeah, so they're running Surdy Shaden on FlyQuest. You are correct.
Yeah.
This is what I get for not doing all my preseason roster notes yet. So, other than what appears to have been like the bones of the Evil Geniuses roster going over to Fly Challengers, it doesn't seem like we're likely to get a big influx of like all those names. Like, I don't think we're gonna see Licorice. I don't think we're gonna see Stixay. I don't think we're gonna see Revenge. I think other than the like rookies or near rookies from the LCS, I think most of them seem to be taking a bye on NACL, which I think is fine.
Yeah.
What I think is I think is the bigger difference maker coming into this offseason is the substitutes coming back, right? Like we got Jenkins coming back, we've got Array coming back. These guys were on substitute contracts for the back half of 2023 and now are going to be kind of returning to the league here in one form or another. At least they're rumored to be. Jenkins is confirmed now. He's going to be on TL Challengers, I think. Array is still a rumor, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
but definitely seems like we're getting some folks back in. I have a take here, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts
On the substitute players.
Yeah, just like in the kind of effect that some consolidation or that some changes in the LCS have had on the makeup of the NACL.
Well, I think especially for players who've been in the LCS for a long time, if they don't get an opportunity, they might just do something similar to what Whippo did, which is just turn on your stream a bunch over the offseason, or at least that's what I think a lot of them should do. I don't really agree with if you still want to be a competitive player, just taking like 6 months off of league entirely. I think you should always at least be keeping up. But for the bigger players, such as Licorice, who've been in the LCS for so long, there's a good chance that he doesn't want to play in NACL as I'm sure, obviously he can't be paid as much in the NACL, and that's a pretty big factor to a lot of players is how much they can be paid. And so for him, since he's probably made a decent amount over the years, it's probably okay. Like, yeah, I can just be unemployed for another for like half a year, and then see on the next time there are roster swaps if he can get on an LCS roster. I'd say that's pretty normal. Like that's happened many different times with people haven't made an LCS roster. They just take like a gap, split, and then come back.
So I'm kind of curious with this because this is something I do agree with the Licorice take. By the way, I think that more than likely these players are not the ones that we're going to see going down to NACL, especially because the stock from Licorice. The risk with that is that his stock may fall down if he doesn't perform up to par in the NACL.
Right.
Not saying that he can, right? But like we've seen this happen where players simply maybe because of the motivation or something like that, they don't really perform to the level that you expect, and that may take a hit onto their stock. But I'm also kind of curious because I brought this idea before when talking about like players that maybe aren't in the best spot right or doesn't have team right now that they can look into that can be competitive, and it's looking at the two regions below NA, which are LLA and BR and CBLOL. Well, but it's Brazil, so BR. And I brought the opinion that LATAM and CBLOL, even if they are trying to make their fan bases big and all that, particularly CBLOL, I think there's a space for any players that are good enough to go down there. And I always make the same point. You can be a top player in those two regions because the level is not that high. Like and this as someone that is part of the region, so I can kind of shit talk my own region to a certain degree. Like we are not that good. That's a reality. We import the washed out Korean pros and they still stomp our region, and that's not a good look. But it's kind of like, to me, it's an opportunity that I feel like any players could try and look into, because one of the big things that any orgs do look at, even if the players from an A or from anywhere, is if you perform at Worlds. And pretty much LATAM and Brazil gives you a free open spot for Worlds at this point. Like, yes, you may get eliminated at one point, but the important part is showing your level at Worlds. And I think that that's something that NA players could look into. And I'm kind of interested in maybe why the reasoning for some NA players not to go to Brazil or to LATAM could be. Because I feel like if we're importing players like ADD from Korea, I'd be more willing to see someone like Licorice that is better than ADD in all accounts, go to LATAM, win there, try and maybe push the region a bit forward thanks to having someone of his caliber playing there, and then show himself in Worlds, because I'm pretty sure that no one in LATAM will be able to face Licorice, even if he's taking an off year. Like, it's just simply the level that they are right now.
So I actually, when I first got out of LCS, and this was like during Proving Grounds or something like 2021, I was talking to someone about joining an LLA team. But the thing is, and you're saying like, why wouldn't you go over there, right? It's to show yourself at Worlds. You really only want to go there if you're absolutely sure you're getting on like a best roster. Is that at least who I was talking to? This is what they're saying is like, if you're going to a minor region, you better make sure that the team you're going to is like top 2 in the region already, exactly. even before you arrive there. And if you're replacing someone, and theoretically that's bringing them from, hypothetically, if they were ranked 2, that they would be number 1 in the region. That would be the only reason why. And it was also very similar to when I was talking to teams in the NLC ERL around the same time. It's only worth it for someone that was in the LCS to go to an ERL if they're making EU Masters. So if you're offered if those top 1 or 2 teams of the regions aren't open to new players and you're getting offers from like the middle of the pack teams, I was advised to not take those offers or risk that chance of you bringing a mid-tier roster to Worlds qualification. Because by chance, if you don't, then everybody's going to be like, oh, he went to a minor region just to stay in the middle of the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, overall, that's true. Like, I would call that, like, to put up an example to that, I would say it's what Summit did this season, where he go to pretty much the number 1 team that already qualified for Worlds. He got into the spot that he's replacing pretty much one of the worst of laners at Worlds, but was one of the very best in the region, which was Bong. There's a lot of info around it, right? But like, that was the best possible outcome for Summit, because he's just going in for a spot that he can cover completely fine, and then he's going to pretty much be the number 1 team in the region as well. So I do agree with your point. Like, it should be around that level, and if you get onto that, like it's pretty easy to qualify after that point, because if you get onto the top 1-2 team, the difference between them and the rest is just so abysmal. Like there's legitimately just player diff can really win you the tournament.
Yeah, I do wonder if that like because that's something we saw. Like Cody's son went to LFL, right, and was on a 10th place team there, and I do wonder if that maybe contributed a little bit towards if there's another world where maybe he's more successful, if that leads to more North American players trying to go and play in ERLs and stuff, which is, I feel like, is always in the back of everyone's minds. I know ever since he left NA, Peter Dunn has been a big advocate for that, and very few, if anybody, has really taken them up on it. Griffin's gone over to LCKCL and stuff like that, but other than that,
well, it's I've seen this a lot, like Jack and Peter. It's just, why don't NA players just play an ERL? It's really not that easy.
Yeah, it is moving to Europe, right?
On top of, I spoke to a lot of ERL teams when I first left LCS, so in 2021, and there were only a few of them that are actually that interested. Like, even though at the time I would certainly be one of the best top laners in their leagues, it's hard for an ERL team to justify bringing over like a North American player, because one, they're gonna have to go through all of these visa process, right? Which is a huge pain in the ass for a lot of these ERL teams. If you're not like Carmine Corp or one of the huge ones. And then two, they have a lot of talent like within their own region, and so if you're in the French league, there's a very high chance they're just going to look for a French player. When I was talking to Rogue, the academy team of Rogue, that was the season after they had won EU Masters. I was talking to their coach, Sharks, who's the coach for FlyQuest now. He's swapped teams.
Immortals now,
I think
right?
It's Immortals. Yeah, he took
Immortals. So I was talking to Sharks, and they were actually, like, maybe we consider you for top lane. And then one day it's like, oh, we found a native Polish top laner, so never mind. It's like, if they find a native player that belongs to their region, it's just that much better for them. So it's really hard I think it's not as easy as Peter or Jack make it sound. Go over to an ERL and practice there. It'd be so good for you. And even with my benefit of having, I'm a European citizen. Like I'm an Irish citizen. So I wouldn't even have to qualify for like a work visa or anything. I could just go over there and do it. And even with that benefit, it was still just it was really hard to find one. And if I did find one, it was like, okay, well, we can't pay you because we're going to be paying your living expenses here. And so you'll just be coming here to play, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was part of like a big problem with the EU players taking any players, particularly I would say NA, like ex NALCS players, particularly just because I do still think maybe the salary was a big factor onto it, right? Like your salary probably was going to be way higher than just taking one random solo queue guy and just paying him who knows what. Like I remember saying,
or I guess you get offered nothing and you say no, right?
A signed T-shirt, 50 euros, and that's it. Like you can go for that, and they will take it, right? So yeah, I feel like that difference also affects, and it's difficult.
It's because they just can't really pay you much. A lot of these ERL teams have very little funding, and then the funding that they do have would be go to making sure you can live there, and rather than be your payment.
Yep.
Like it has to be worth to a certain degree, and I do agree. Like it's not as easy as they paint it. I feel like it's better to try and show yourself at Worlds if you can accomplish that, or at a team that really can showcase your level. But like you're pointing out, like it's not just a straight up go there and you win. Like you have to at the very least have a plan behind it to try and come back.
Right.
Yep. I think that makes sense. On that same note, right, with the turnover coming on, and you referred to it a little bit there, TDS. I do wonder, we talked about how ex-LCS players, could afford to take some time off, the kind that Whippo did. I'm gonna recycle some tweets from a little bit ago. I do wonder, with this makes 6 rumored not even rumored, now they're all confirmed, 6 LCS players for 2024 who did not play any comp in summer 2023. I do wonder if there's a conversation to be had about whether LCS doesn't put enough emphasis on continuity of play. And I'm curious on perspective of somebody now moving into Tier 2. Is there a degree of frustration as a player in Tier 2 that the recruiting isn't coming from tier 2, and I'm sure importing contributes to this as well, but also towards just picking up players who've just been on break or anything like that. It's like, how do you compete, right, with the idea of Whippo when you haven't really when he hasn't really been playing, right? So everybody's just thinking about when the last time they saw him.
I think that when it comes to especially like older veteran players that just get picked up out of nowhere, they were on break and then it's like, okay, let's bring them back. I think there's a very long trend that every single one of those players that gets that kind of opportunity, they've been to Worlds before. You saw it with Solo, you saw it with Ignar, you saw it with Whippo, you even saw it with Hanser. All of those players have had they took one or multiple splits off, but they've all been to Worlds before, right? And they've had however you think their performance was, they've had okay showings. And so I think a lot of these teams that pick up players like that, it's just, they've had a worlds position, they didn't bomb out, all right, let's just get them, rather than going for someone in tier 2. I'd say like one of the only exceptions was Dokla, but Dokla worked really hard. Like he was
like
in
Dokla
CQ
was a
every
tier 2
day.
promotion for sure.
Yeah, Dokla I'd say is one of the only exceptions where he like grinded his ass off in CQ and he played amateur tournaments. He didn't take a break, he kept going until he made it back.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious with the players now that I like looking into it a bit more, right? Because we talk about players that have played at Worlds, and I'm kind of curious if teams right now, because I don't want to blame everything at teams being negligent or not like wanting to look into scouting for these players to give the potential. I'm kind of curious if obviously there always have to be something behind the scenes that teams don't or people don't actually get to see. Like teams obviously operate in a way that has to make sense for them. I don't follow their logic. I cannot go really deep into it. I don't think their logic makes sense to me, but it has to make sense in some way for them. And I'm kind of curious if a lot of their signings right now come with some thought that maybe the LCS will not last long enough, so they need to reap rewards right now, and taking players with more tenure gives them that sort of opportunity instead of developing them. I'm kind of curious if that could be a reasoning behind it, for example.
So, a lot of it's not just the teams, but very often when you're thinking of rosters, I guess it depends on which LCS team you're on, but they will go to the players and ask them, hey, what do you think about this player? Would you want to play with him on a team? And more often than not, the players on the team will almost 90% of the time want to go toward a player that is verifiably good. Like they've seen them before, they've played well, because they're not just thinking about, okay, is this player good? Is he going to play well in his role? They're thinking about, okay, if I take a chance on someone that's new that I don't know is verifiably good, that in return makes me look worse too. Because if everyone is doing worse, then that's just, it makes everybody look bad.
Yep.
And so more often than not, if you asked a player, it would be, oh yeah, I just want all the verifiably good players on my team, even if they're all, extreme veterans, they've been around for a very long time, because then it's a lot safer, a lot less stress on their back of, oh, if the team looks bad because of this one player, then I'm going to look bad. So it's just a matter of like who's willing to take risks. And I think actually players are less willing to take risks on their roster than an org is. The org really has to be the one to push, like, we need to take a risk here.
So actually, and thinking about it, is like potentially one perfect example for that could be 100 Thieves, right? In the last year with Double Lift on I think it was the roster before that was the Bjergsen, Summit, Closer, Double Lift, and I don't remember if their support was Busho. No, about the support, I don't remember who their support was, if it was Busho.
Are we talking about in spring or?
Yeah, because I don't remember
in spring
when
it was
Bjergsen
in
retired.
spring it was Tenacity Buzio with Closer, Bjergsen, Double Lift.
Okay, yeah. So that was a roster mix with both proven and unproven players, right? And then for summer, they went for even more unproven players because they took Quad, they took they had Quad in the mid lane. They were still with Bushio, so you could technically say he was a bit more proven. And then you have Closer that was proven, and for top lane it was
Someday.
Summit again,
Someday.
or Someday. Yeah, sorry,
Yep.
Someday. So I'm kind of curious if that could be a really good example of what you're talking about, where there was attempt at taking risks, but also attempt at trying to not be like to be as safe as possible with some of those players, and it kind of backfired to a certain degree for 100 pips in that sense.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I mean, yeah, I think everybody usually would come to the conclusion that a mix of both is what they want. Is like they want some new rookie, and then he's surrounded by veterans. Whether how many of them you want, you could say like 4 veterans and 1 rookie, or 3 and 2. I guess it just depends on who you're talking about, because sometimes there are like really insane rookies that are just like, yeah, that he's him. He's gonna do really well. Um, it changes from player to player, but yeah, I'd say still most of the time, if you ask a player, they're like, yeah, give me someone who's not new.
Well, it makes sense. Like, I hate the narrative that you like if a player didn't perform the year before, even though he's proven, right? Like, if he doesn't perform for one split, not even a year, for one split, he's already not going to perform again. And then you have
Yeah.
to look into a rookie to replace him. Like, people don't understand that this is not how, even in most traditional sports, you would be laughed at for thinking that a veteran will not work out for more than one season just because he didn't perform that one particular time. And then
Right.
looking at the rookies, right? Like, in even looking at just only League of Legends history, the team that I can remember the most for having 5 rookies that worked out immediately as soon as they came out the gate was Griffin.
Yeah, I was
And
about to say
even
Griffin too.
then, yeah, even then they had Sword. That it doesn't count as a rookie because he was coming up of playing
Sure,
already
but
for a bit of time in the LCK CL, what was CL at the time. So it's not true 5 rookies. It's rookies and then a team that makes sense cohesively. But I feel like you have to have veterans to round up the right rookies, and it happens in a lot of sports. Like, the rookie has to be great. Don't get me wrong. The rookie can be great, but you have to have a team that makes sense around him also to bring out his potential. And people just want to see rookies because, yes.
I think that's fair. I want to get back towards off season a little bit here, just to chat about some of the other things that we've seen coming on in with our little time off here before we get back into NACL. One thing is off season champs queue has come on back here. It's on the preseason patch. I see you've been playing in there a little bit, Allorim. Curious to hear about kind of firsthand thoughts on exactly what impact that kind of has on the practice environment. How useful is it really? I think a lot of lay people, the benefits seem obvious, and I think, I tend to agree with that as well. But I've heard compelling arguments that, the wait times are miserable and the queue system is bad, and the presence of comms and just the way it's set up can have a negative impact on certain practice styles. Where do you kind of fall in that department?
Oh man, it's a lot. I'd say, this version of CQ that we're talking about, I'd say this is like advanced PBE. The current CQ, this is more like advanced PBE. Like, you're playing the new patch. There's no prizes, right? You can be rank 1, it won't matter. Like, you're not getting any money, you're not getting a prize. This is purely for trying out the new stuff, and maybe like you give feedback to Riot or something like that. Or at least they're watching the CQ games, and they'll take the balance off that. See, maybe the initial patch of season 14 will be more balanced around pro play, since they have like a better idea of like how it looks in pro play now that they have this version. As for past versions of CQ, like with prizes and it's all in LA server, I think that's really cool. Although for me, I'm really annoyed because by the time they came out with CQ, I had already moved back to the East Coast. And like, I had just got kicked off Immortals, right? I moved back to Georgia. And then lo and behold, here's Champions Queue, $20,000 first place. And I'm like, man, because I get like 90 ping in Georgia. And I'm like, well, this is really terrible for all of us on the East Coast. And even with that, there were a lot of people who didn't play on the West Coast. Like, they were just like, whatever. And that's because what you're saying is like there's comms and the queue system is quote unquote bad. I don't think the queue system is bad. Like it's literally as simple as you go to Champions queue, you go to queue, and you press queue.
Yeah, it's a Discord bot, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's really not. I would not ever say that the queue is bad. But what did happen, and why people were getting less and less interested in CQ is because I guess who they let in it bothered some people. That there were some infamous players that were in CQ that were not up to the level that I'd say CQ was theorized to be. Like some of the Latin American players, like especially from the lower level ones. Some of like the lower level tier, like you had to be top 16 in the OQs and NACL or the PG OQ, and so even the bottom 16, like the bottom 16th team, that meant they were able to play, right? And most of the time they weren't that good, especially compared to the LCS players. So what happens is like an LCS player who doesn't like someone, they'll see them in queue. It's like, oh, well, I don't want to queue up now. And so I think that just kind of trickled to a lot of the other players. It's like, oh yeah, I don't want to play with that guy because he ran down my game. As for me, I didn't play because I didn't want to play from East Coast 90 ping. I would have loved, like right now, if you threw $20,000 prize, and how it was ridiculous how much money they were giving away in CQ. If you put that in Chicago server, I would have stopped playing. But I know I didn't even bother because I'm on the East Coast. And what I thought came true is all the top 10, every single monetary winner of CQ, they were all West Coast players. No one from the East Coast had a chance to win because of just you're playing against someone on 5 ping against 90 ping. Like, how could you possibly make top 10 that way? But yeah, there were a couple of things. There were multiple reasons, and I'm not going to say that's an excuse as to not play CQ. I think CQ as a whole is a really good idea. It's just, League of Legends players are kind of lazy and at their soul,
at their core.
Yeah, at their very core, it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't really want to do that. So unless someone is making them do it, they're like, nah, like I'll just chill. Or after a day of scrims, do I want to go into comms again, or do I want to chill with my boys in Discord and just play some solo queue in my own time? And a lot of the times that's gonna be, yeah, why don't I just chill with my boys? So this all that stuff adds up.
So I'm kind of curious because you're bringing up the point, right, of someone forcing them to, like, have any orcs that or that you've worked with ever like thought into putting that into the contract, for example, like maybe not CQ, but like with the amount of games you have to play or things like that, right? Like force them into that sort of thing.
No, I've never seen that in a contract.
So I'm kind of curious because the limitations in those contracts always are big. Like I've heard multiple times that players cannot go on motorcycles, cannot drive to some matches by themselves. They cannot take any sort of drink that is not seen by the team. Even they are enforced for certain meals that have to be approved by their own teams to be even able to eat. So things like that are forced in football. And I know that also happens to a certain degree in NBA and NFL. Like they have to be there. There are things that are completely limited and voided by the teams. They cannot do that. And if not, they are fined or things like that. But like you're forced into certain things. So I'm kind of surprised LCS teams don't like try this at the very least to see how the effect works.
So in an LCS contract, and this was at least all in my contracts, from Optic, Immortals, Echo Fox, they always had a clause in there that it wasn't like very specific. It was kind of vague of, hey, you agree that you will perform to the best of your abilities and keep up with the game. Like, in paraphrasing, like you'll play the game, you'll keep up with it to the best of your abilities to perform the best on the team. Usually that's not, I guess it's hard to say how that's enforced because, the orgs can't go into a mind of a player and, like, let's say he's performing poorly. They don't have the big boss sitting behind him forcing him, you get on that keyboard and mouse and you play that solo queue game, because like how you can only wonder how effective is that actually of forcing a player, hey, you must play a solo queue and we're going to track every single time you do. Like, because to a lot of people that's like, well, solo queue can sometimes be more like, it might not even be efficient, right? what happens if you get into a game and someone runs it down and you FF15? Does that count as your checkbox for one solo queue game of the day, or is like go again and make sure it's a real game? You can't really guarantee those things.
Yeah.
I guess as for things in an LCS contract that that you said to relate to real sports is like we don't have anything like you watch what you every drink that you take, but there was ones like you can't go on camera with any brand other unless we say so specifically.
Okay. Yeah.
It said don't. It was fun. This one was always funny to me because it was in every single one of my LCS contracts. It's like you must not present yourself as naked in any photo and any video, and I thought that was always so funny because it's like that's why do you have to have that on a contract?
It's doomed.
But it was blatantly on there. It says you are not allowed to be nude on any photography, no video, like
no softcore, no hardcore, no nothing.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not-
I thought that was really funny. They always had the ones about you're not allowed to do meth or cocaine, or I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah, well,
like
yeah.
oh man,
Pretty straightforward.
It's like man, you guys
Can't
got
do
me.
anything.
Like, I was
in
I was
LA
planning on
anymore.
smoking all my meth before the math.
Yeah, John wouldn't be a pro in current League of Legends times, it seems.
But yeah, those were all in my all in the contracts. But there was never any, we're gonna have our pit boss behind you, forcing you to play solo queue games.
That makes sense.
I'm actually kind of curious also talking about it, right? Like already the situations with the players are kind of funny, but also having experienced like the time of the as a pro player where you have been part of or taken the critics from a lot of the fans and things like that. I'm kind of curious. What wouldn't it have been easier for like the pro LCS players? You don't have to have the best of practice, but like maybe for quote unquote show, like try and play the solo queue game so that you can save some face at some point, or where like people wouldn't care that much about it.
For me, I can't empathize with that because I've always been very big on my solo queue games. Like for me, if I'm not challenger, I'm mad. Like it feels worse. I feel like I look worse if I'm not in challenger, at least. I like to sit in the top 50 of solo queue like at all times. So if I fall to Grandmaster or like back then Master, I'm like grinding all day to get back to Challenger, up 20 games a day until I get back. For other players, it's like their LP, ELO doesn't matter to them at all. But I know some people share very similar sentiments to me because I know Dardoch feels the same way. The higher on the ladder he is, the better he feels about his own play, and that's exactly how I feel. It just changes from player to player. And you can't say, hey, you're going to play better if you're higher on solo queue to anyone, because that's just how they feel personally. And I can't, to me, it doesn't make sense. In the same way, I have been very critical, maybe not publicly, but I've been very critical to my friends and other esports players about coaches in League of Legends who don't play at all.
Okay.
I'm pretty critical on coaches especially positional coaches. If you're a positional coach and you're not playing the game at all, like you're sitting in your platinum solo queue games, like 10 games a season, I'm wondering how do you have a job? You're a positional coach. You're supposed to teach someone their position, and you don't keep up with the game yourself and mechanically. I've been very critical. I won't name anybody, but I've definitely had shaken my fist in the air at certain coaches that I've just seen like they get a coaching job because like they're an ex-player and they just never play the game ever again.
Yeah. Like I gotta admit, like at the time, even before I was a caster, I was looking into getting into coaching myself. Like I got through that, and that was one of the big things like I remember thinking about. And it's not so much as having to prove myself, but I feel like it is a factor for players in a lot of moments. Like it stays on the back of the head for a lot of time. Like I have to get the respect in some way that the players would be willing to like follow me, right? Or follow what I said to them. And if I'm not high enough, like you don't have to be, I would say, like the best player ever, right? You don't need to be high challenger, but at the very least, if you're really, really close to challenger, I would say right now it's Grandmaster. I won't say
Right.
you need to be Grandmaster number 1, but you're close to
Yeah.
qualifying for Challenger. I feel like that still brings some respect that the players would be willing to follow you. So
Yeah,
I do get that point behind it.
exactly, because I can tell you, as speaking from a player, and when I've done some coaching myself, I know I would have loved it if my coach was also a challenger player. And in my head, a lot of players in League of Legends, they have some ego, right? I don't think that's any secret. Even especially a lot of the pros, they have a little ego to them. If you put yourself in their shoes, like they're a challenger player, they're in the LCS, like how much respect are they giving to like their coach who's like been playing in gold or silver for years, right? So
True.
so I know when I was a player, I would have like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. Like I play with this guy in solo queue, so you can verifiably see if he's doing what he's talking about. If you can practice what you preach is what I really like in a coach. And that's why, at least for myself, I thought that was a big benefit of what I coached, is that if I'm telling you something, it's because I've done it before too. And I can currently do it and put it into practice. And I think that's really important for a league coach.
Yeah, I think that it can work. Like that pretty much works for a lot of the players. And I like thinking about like not only the coaches but in general consensus for some of the players. I like something came up to my mind and I'm kind of curious. Now that we have an ex-player, we can actually ask this sort of things before behind the scenes. Well, how much you can talk is on you, but I'm kind of curious. Do teams and players and coaches really let themselves be affected by the hype man of Twitter Reddit takes? Like, do they actually get impacted by them, or are they just taking like the sort of comments that we read, we laugh at it, and then we continue with our lives?
I think it depends who it is. Like, there are a lot of players that are more sensitive than others. I know for myself, I read every thread, I read every tweet, like, but it doesn't matter to me. I think I'm more thick-skinned than some other players, and I kind of take it in stride. Like, why am I worried about what they're gonna say, right? I'm just gonna play my own game. But there are absolutely players that get affected by social media, and they need to deactivate their Twitter accounts, or
Okay.
tell themselves they won't log into Reddit so they won't be tempted to click on a post-match thread. You would see that very often. A lot of players would just not look at a post-match thread. I know sometimes if I had a really bad game on an LCS stage or an academy game, I just wouldn't look at the thread until like the next week.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not so much as it would like, oh, if I read those comments, it's like you're gonna make me play worse.
But like,
More
why
just
would you
like
do
I
that
didn't,
to yourself?
yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
feel a need. I didn't feel a need to at the time, exactly. But like I've been shit talked many times before. It's no, I've had bad games before, and I'm sure a lot of people weren't happy seeing me play that way. But seeing like, oh yeah, Allorim he played so shit here, like this guy's awful. Well, I'm like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
But some people would probably take that to heart, but it's whatever to me.
Makes sense. I do want to chat a little bit while we're still on the subject of the off season. I do want to chat a little bit about Aegis champs. By the way, congrats on first team All Star top laner Allorim for the previous ACL split. We'll see. I don't know how many different votes were cast there, but I know I contributed to that one a little bit.
Yeah, we kind of got flamed for them, but
We got
like,
flamed
I
for them.
stand by
Dude,
it.
Winthrop is
Yeah.
real upset about this. I think Artemis tweeted like that the results were ridiculous. I think Summer and Gabrielle were in chat asking for the votes to be published. They're out for blood, man. I don't know how many people voted. I know it wasn't just me and you, but they're hunting us down, dude.
I stand by my vote anyway. Like they can come at me, but I will defend my votes at the
I have
until
my
the end
vote
of
somewhere.
the day.
I'd have to go and check. It's been so long since we voted. But that aside, really cool to have you here in particular, Allorim, because you were in ACL from summer into fall. So for anyone that's just here for NACL or even less, the Aegis Champions League was kind of an off-season Tier 3 tournament that has been going on throughout the year, but for fall, this split in the off-season, it really blew up. We had representatives from, I mean, every NACL team, if you count substitutes. If you don't count substitutes, it was 9 out of 10. We would be missing Maryville. Yeah, so it was a really big tournament this time around. Mirage Alliance and managed to make top 4. You guys were participants, and
Gordo, we should have brought like the graphic that we had made where it was like XLCS players,
Yeah,
world's participants, NACL, just
Like,
to try and
that graphic
make
was
this
inaccurate
look
like
better.
day 2. It's fine. We could leave that one out of it. But so curious on like thoughts on ACL, particularly from like summer into fall, and like how different of a scene it was coming into this much like bigger, more competitive split.
Um,
And you don't
Do you
have to
think
sweet
that-
you don't have to sweet talk ACL just because TDS and I are here.
all right.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, one, I think ACL was great. We had won the one previous to this. I don't know what got into everybody. Like all the tier 2 players were like, yeah, I do feel like playing a tournament, because I feel like that doesn't happen very often where
Yeah.
they're all just like, oh yeah, let's group up and play. I don't know what happened. I can't tell you. I know for myself, all it was is someone or Norm asked like, hey, we want to play an ACL, and all of us said yes. It wasn't even like we sought it out directly as players. We were just told about it. But I know for sure someone on the other players, like especially the more ragtag teams, they had to be sought out by other players. I'm really trying to find like a reason as to why it's happening.
I am too. That's why I
Because-
asked you. So
Yeah.
because in theory you'd think that less people would play because LCS got lower amounts of spots on it. The salaries for tier 2 have been going down ever since Academy. Although I will say for some reason I think the salaries for tier 2 actually went up going into next split.
from summer
which-
to spring, I have heard that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
Which I don't
really?
know how.
Okay.
Yes, which I don't know how that's the case.
I think it's I think it's Mirage and Supernova's fault, like low key.
Is
like,
it our fault?
I don't
Okay,
know.
wait.
My understanding is that you guys are spending a little bit more, but I don't know.
I really need to get the context for this. Like I'm behind the game with this sort of information.
See, I don't know because I'm cheap, man. Like I'm not asking. I don't ask for much. I
don't know. My
usually when
sources
I
are
sign to-
unreliable, so who's to say?
when I ask for a salary from like a tier 2 team, I'm asking just pay my rent, and that's it. I'm not asking for
enough.
anything more. So I feel like I'm pretty cheap compared to what a lot of other people are asking.
Did Norm promise you one jersey as well in the process, just like with one big camel in the center?
I don't have a jersey. We don't have jerseys yet.
Ooh.
Wait, you're behind the game, Norm. Just in case if
If
Norm
you guys
is
are gonna make
watching
finals,
this,
you need
need
jerseys.
to get
I'm just
jerseys.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Exactly.
gonna have them, but yeah. As for the ACL, I think it went great. I'd say a lot of the team. I don't know if a lot of the teams were like us, because on Mirage we didn't practice at all for it. We just went into every game raw. I don't know what the other teams were like. I'm sure the collegiate teams were practicing together since they're guaranteed to be with each other for the next semester. But in terms of like the level of play and the level of players, that was all really great. And I can't tell if tier 2 is actually going to be stronger as a result of everyone trying in the offseason too, just because there's so many huge changes coming into season 14. But I mean, I'm all for that. As someone who plays in pretty much every event ever since, I started playing competitive league, whether that was an amateur before I went to the LCS or amateur after I went in the LCS, I compete in every event. So that's just me, but I'm glad that more people were like, yeah, let's play some games. Let's play competitive.
Yeah, I do remember that. So it's interesting that we still don't have an answer, because I am curious as to kind of what changed in the scene to kind of transform it from summer into fall. Because in summer especially, well, not in summer especially, I think it's gotten more competitive with each split. But even looking back as recently as summer, that your guys' opponents in the finals were Return of the Middle Sticks, who went 2-3 in OQs. Like it was. There were a couple of OQ teams and then a lot of like Masters GM teams. And it wasn't anything like it was this split. I remember having a conversation with NA Amateur Pariah and Capitalist King Protz from Team Ambition, who
Of course.
I
Wait,
mean,
prods,
not
yeah.
that his word means much these days, but I remember asking at the time, like, there's so many open qualifier teams that go like, they form and they practice and they go 2-3 or they go 1-4, and then they just do all their players just play in nothing for other than solo queue for 6+ weeks until the next open qualifier rolls around, and then they do it again, and then they don't play again for months until the next season rolls around. And I remember talking to him like, why are these players, why do these teams not just come and join something like ACL? And the overriding opinion at the time was there's so many other low tier teams in this tournament that the practice just doesn't mean that much.
I see.
And whether that has validity or not, it's crazy that we seem to have just like randomly springboarded past that by just everybody competitive joining all at the same time and somewhat eliminating that. Although it was a 32 team tournament, there were definitely some lower tier teams in there as well. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think that kind of affects the quality of surely it affects the quality of the games, but does it affect the decision calculus around playing in a tournament like this?
I think the more good players that join, the more other good players want to join. It's very similar to CQ, actually. Is that if you see good players join, all right, let's go. But if you I think in the finals of the previous ACL, we played against Return of the Middle Sticks, right?
Yep.
Which that roster, quite frankly, would not even be top 8 of like the last ACL.
Mm-hmm.
Like they would lose out pretty early. So it very similar to CQ. It's just like if you see a bunch of good players join, the higher chance you're going to get the other good players on board is what I think all it is. Although going to your point about like why do those teams that go like 1-4, 2-3, even 0-5, why don't they play in more of the amateur tournaments that aren't the OQs? I'm not really sure. I always thought that when I went pro, the best thing you could do is take really small steps in your career. Like the better you do in these kind of things, like the more chances you're going to get. But I think a more modern view of how to go pro in League of Legends isn't the small steps that I took, playing on one team, like didn't make it past the open qualifier, play on another team, get a little bit further, play on another. And eventually I qualified for OQ and went pro. Right. But those small steps I don't think are as relevant today, because I think what everybody wants to do to go pro is I'm going to hit 1.8 KLP solo queue, and you're going to catch the eye of some current pro player. He's going to mention you to their manager. You'll get like into a combine or a tryout, and maybe you'll land into a spot on like one of the high paying or more relevant teams like, TLA or FlyQuest Academy currently, or DSG. So I think that's the current popular way to go pro, is how high in solo queue can I get?
Yeah, that's fair. That was kind of like the path that somebody like Shaden took, really, to
right.
Yeah, to like
Exactly.
end up on C9 Academy back when the academy scene was a little bit more robust, when it had more than 2 to 3 teams to be named.
Yeah.
I'm thinking if that was also Cryo's bad, like talking about players, because
Maybe.
Cryo is someone that has been popping up in names for some of the teams, and I don't remember having seen him in any other place, like apart from the
he was
EG
on
combined.
he was on that one. What was it? What were they? They were the Cheese Chasers, right? It was
It was Scooped. It was Kryra, Scooped.
Yeah, they had like Ninim on the bench too. It was a lot of the EG combine guys.
Yeah, because he was a name that popped up really out of nowhere in my eyes. So maybe that is one of those examples where he got higher up in the ladder, and then maybe trying out after being the EG combined, and that he went a little bit farther into it. But could be the case with some of those players. And I do think also, like, I'm not sure how much, but like even just getting guys, right? Like I'm not sure how much being on a streamer's game, for example, could be also helping you with that, right? Like if you're a high challenger and you end up in who's like I don't follow a lot of streamers recently that are like
Tyler,
maybe
Tyler one.
No, you can be on double lifts,
the big
you can
one.
be on Quantum.
Yeah, someone like double stream, right?
Player.
And maybe that also like can bring eyes to you in some way. Like if you appear on one of those big streamers like games, maybe that helps a lot. So could be another route for some of these players. My theory originally with the ACL, and the one that I feel like it's the most true, just thinking about how it kind of all went by, is that they saw the initial prize pool and they thought it was an easy tournament to win. And then as soon as other teams went by thinking with the same logic, the tournament got big enough that it just strong teams kind of occurred. And that's why we had like the combination of weirder teams coming in.
That is,
and I feel like that was the logic.
I do know of I won't name names, but I do know of at least one team that was coming in that ended up fielding a totally different roster than they originally intended to, because certain people got a little antsy about the quality of competition. So there's
Yeah.
They're like, oh man,
yeah, there's
the big boys.
there's
the big
definitely
boys
a little
came.
bit of that going on here or there. So fair enough.
Hopefully we get big enough so that the next tournament we get a tournament realm accounts, and that way we don't have to make the big wait times and things like that, and players can actually play on the really good ping. That would be
True.
even better.
True. I try.
Yeah,
I
for
was.
sure.
I don't know what close means, but I did get to have a source ask Whooply for a TR account to watch CQ with the Salt Mine, and we did not get one. So
Would be good.
for those who
Yeah,
want to
deny
riot, go ahead and go and complain on Twitter. We're already at an hour. I do want to talk about one more thing before we call it, and that is coming into next season. We have heard that there will be Fearless Draft in NACL, and do you want to hear like some thoughts on Fearless Draft? I have some of my own opinions. I'd love to hear what you think, Allorim, as someone who's going to have to come in and play with it, especially as someone who's been, playing under more traditional draft formats for forever.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not even. But if you asked me, like, hey, do you want to do Fearless Draft? I think I would say no, purely off of like, no, I don't want to change.
Mm-hmm.
But because if you forced it upon me like it's happening, I'm not sweating it, because maybe people would sweat if they had like smaller champ pools, but I feel like I usually play a lot of different champions. So I don't think it's going to affect me that much. And very often in these best of fives, I end up playing 3 to 5 different champions in best of fives. I very rarely just stick to one character the whole time. I can't tell you the general consensus of it. I guess most people are like, cool. And I think in terms of viewership, or like people who are looking on an outside, they're like sick, because some complaints of competitive League of Legends is that you'll have too many runbacks of like the same champions. If that helps the scene grow, then actually I'm all for it. But in terms of a pure competitive point of view, I'm not like leaping for joy for Fearless Draft, but I'm also not, disgusted by it. For me, it's just, yeah, cool. Like, I'll do that. It's not a big enough deal for me to complain about it. Although I do think it's an overall win as long as it gets more people interested into the league.
Yeah. I agree the interest is going to be good. My kind of gripe with it is, and maybe this is more conceptual than anything, but my kind of beef with it is that I don't like that it kind of removes the need to adapt to certain strats that your opponents are bringing out, right? Like traditionally, right, if you come in to a day, you've got your bans prepped, these are the things we need to ban against X team, and then X team brings out some strat you weren't prepared for, or they show more skill on a comp that you weren't expecting. And in the current world, now you need to adapt to that, right? At pro play, you need to change up your bans, you need to let something else through,
some pick order.
Exactly. Yeah. But now you don't really have to do that. Now you get to just kind of go, whew, all right, well, we don't have to play that against that again, and now it's gone. So I mean, point. For that reason, if we were trying to increase champion diversity, I almost wish that they would do like a rotation, like a standard, like just say like come into the split and be like, here, these are the 80 to 100 to 120, whatever, pick a number, right? These are the 80 champs that are going to be like in rotation for this split. And be like, everything else is disabled, and then we'll change out at random. And maybe maybe we'll do patches, right, where we'll rotate in 5 champs, we'll rotate out 5 champs as the season goes on. I'd like to see something like that to increase diversity, just so that at least then it creates a unique meta. But I get it. I mean, people don't want to see the same champ over and over again.
Yeah.
And if it does have benefits to viewership, more power to it. And I don't know if it continues to be popular. Maybe it's just the future of Comp League, one way or the other.
Right. Now that you say that, I actually do think that the level of play and the quality of the games is probably going to go down.
That's what I've heard from people who watched
yeah.
LDL. I have heard that LDL BO5s got real silly as they started going to Game 5.
I'm thinking like, all of a sudden you can't form a coherent comp. You're just picking at some point, especially if it gets to Game 5, you're just picking champions you know how to play and that you're confident in. Not that they necessarily work well together. It almost makes me think that things are going to come down to as who got more lane counter picks in Game 5 rather than whose comp is built better.
So is that the place where we finally see red side being like the most dominant side ever?
Maybe.
Finally, it's red side meta. It's all been building up to this.
So I'm kind of curious with the fear of this draft, not because I'm not against it. I like to see how things change up, especially because, and obviously this is not to attack the NACL, but it's the secondary league, right? So if you want to test out things, test it out on the league that doesn't impact the direction, the direct pro play. So I'm also kind of in the side that yes, things may get a lot messy, but looking at it potentially for the future, and maybe this is more cope than anything else, like I feel like giving players this sort of forced mentality to have to adapt to situations will also make them be more willing to adapt when looking at pro play, right? So I feel like that is one of the big issues right now with pro play, and it's not that players aren't like that players can adapt, but that they are not willing to take that risk in some situations. And I feel like maybe forcing them from the roots can begin changing that sort of mindset when looking into pro play. For some top laner that comes in from the NACL, forced into having to take more of a deep dive into their pool, and then you go into the LCS and you're more willing to maybe look into a champion that you were never willing to because you were forced to when you started developing. I think that may be a more positive aspect, and if it works out in that way, I can see Fearless having even more of a positive impact into the future.
I think that's funny because I guess now we're talking about two different ways of what we consider adapting. Because what Gordo said is it reduces adapting because let's say you played against a comp that you weren't ready for and that you can't beat. Well, the next game you don't have to adapt to it because they can't play it anymore. But on the way you're saying is your way of saying adapting is having a deeper champion pool. They have to adapt to okay, they can't stay on two, three different champions. They have to learn way more than that.
I think like the difference here, like just quickly, like think that the difference here comes in because I feel like with Gordo's point, it's more focused on what happens deeply on the NACL, right? If it stays on the NACL square, like there, the adapting is not really the case. But since the LCS for me is more so because I'm if they go up to the LCS, that's not going to be the case. Like they are going to be playing with the open format that
that's assuming that it doesn't continue to spread.
It's with the difference of where you're looking at from, right? Like I'm looking more so on the, let's say the upper part of the stair, where Gordo is looking more so at the root part of the NACL.
Well, it is like a perspective thing too. I do think, I think there's definitely something to be said that it's like, because I do think, I mean, my critique is around this vision of draft that I don't think has ever really existed, right? Where everybody's like a mastermind playing 5D chess, constructing these really specific comps and, making complete pivots the second they see a champion versus another champion. Whereas my understanding at least is that a lot more drafts kind of play out a little bit more simply than that, where it's like, hey, who do you feel comfortable playing here? What works with the comp? But nobody's at least very few people are coming into there like,
well, I don't think there's ever a true coach,
draft mastermind coming in,
like a
doing
coach who single-handedly manages every
exactly.
draft.
Like nobody really plays like that, so maybe picking formats around that dream is just silly in the first place. And
I don't even think
I didn't do that when I coached. No, I know when I coach too. Like I'm coaching in the way where I'm directing the flow of the draft more than, hey, we should pick this and this and this. It's a lot of, I think the best way to draft is asking as a coach is you need to like ask questions. And the big thing is prepare players to answer them fast. Like my biggest pet peeve as a coach during draft is, I'm directing the flow of it. And okay, I know that we need to pick like, let's say we need to pick a top laner on 3 or something on red side. If I go, okay, hey, top laner, what do you want? I don't want to hear like, for like 30 seconds, then we get down to 1 second left and say, give me Renekton. You know, I hated that.
Yeah.
I think a good coach is directing the flow in a way where you ask a question very early on in the draft to the player you're directed to, and then you're forcing them to answer that question as soon as they can, like with what they know will work. And obviously that comes with time, but that's just the way I think coaching drafting should go, at least for me.
Funny enough, I actually think though, like the coolest application of Fearless Draft would be like that world where you have these mastermind drafters doing everything, right? Because like I think the coolest interpretation of Fearless Draft would be like you have this mastermind coach who's like, they picked Kennen last game, so now Kennen's disabled. So now we know that one's not available. So we ban AP top laner ABC 1 2 3. We first pick Malphite and it's Thanos now, right? Like all of a sudden, totally changing your champion priorities based on looking steps ahead. On what's disabled and what isn't, and how that affects the champion pool. I just don't think anyone's going to do that, though. It's just not going to happen, right?
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah,
I don't think we've got light Yagami over here.
Exactly, like nobody's going to do that. So it's.
I'm also kind of curious, actually, like looking into the Fearless Draft, right? Because game quality may go down, but I'm kind of curious if being more forced into being adept at a champion makes it so that people become a bit more mechanic intensive. Could that be another thing? Like maybe players become a bit more mechanically intensive, and that also kind of boosts the map a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. I know. I can think of a situation where you like people are gonna start banning one player specifically in Fearless Draft to where they're gonna choke out so much of their champ pool that they have to have something bigger. Like, for example, let's say you had a jungler who is a very big Kindred Graves player, right? You ban Kindred Graves, okay? Then he picks Viego, okay? Now the next game, whether he won or lost, right? He can't pick that again. Ban Kindred Graves again, and technically you have a third slotted ban of Viego. And then what happens if you just
keep going?
I think there's going to be a strategy of you target one player the whole series and force them to go down this pipeline of good champions, okay champions, and like I'm gonna lose the game.
Yeah,
you end up with a situation where he has to play like Malphite in the jungle because there's nothing.
Exactly. Like you're gonna force him to like play something he's not used to, and you're gonna get wins off of abusing one player. I think that would happen more often, Fearless.
I think
that actually. Oh, sorry, Gordo. I was thinking because with the mind games, maybe they actually opt into playing the bad champion in a game that it's lost anyway, or something like that, and then they play the good champion. They leave the good champion for game 5. Like, could be actually an angle for that.
True.
That's true. It's funny because that actually happened to me in Academy once. I think I was on Echo Fox and we were playing against TSM Academy, and so when we were like 5P top that game, but I remember. They had banned Sion, Ornn, Yorick, Urgot.
The whole Allorim champion pool. This is probably pre-on-hit Nico days, right?
It was New York, like the brand New York. And I was the first person competitively to play Yorick, actually. And then they banned a 5th tank, too. So they had put 5 bans on me, and I just locked in Poppy, and we won the game. But... that's funny because that has happened to me before. It's where you've had 5 bans targeted on me, and then I was just thinking, in a context where if that was Fearless and I didn't play Poppy earlier, but like let's say I had, then I would have had 6 champions down the drain. I'm like, okay, like what else?
Yeah.
By
that point you would have 9.
Hilarious.
If by the time you're in a 5 game,
9,
I'm thinking of this hilarious universe where you have 5 bans on one player, and you're on game 5, so you can't play 4 of the champions you played previously.
Yeah.
So you have to go to your 10th place.
You need to go 10 champs deep now. Yeah, that's the rule.
Yeah. But imagine the memes. Like if you win with that, like
if you win with that, you have like the biggest champ. You like I'm the ocean. I'm Poseidon, right? Like
yeah, you get the biggest. Just you can ban everything you want, but I'm still gonna win against you. That's how bad you guys are.
Yeah. That's
well,
funny.
That was a take I started hearing in certain circles when because he's reversed course now and posted the contract signing GIF. But there was a period of the offseason where it sounded like Quacker was going to be teamless, was not going to be playing in the NACL, and he tweeted
Oh
as
yeah, I
such.
saw that.
And I
Actually.
saw like right after that happened, I saw the take floating around like. Think Fearless Draft killed Quacker's career a little bit. Like he can't. He's only going to be able to play Olaf once a night. What do you
I
even
for
do?
one cannot wait for Darius to be out of the game after one game.
Yeah, it's
that's okay with me. I think there's a strategy too in a best of 5, because when we played against Supernova, or when my team ever played against Quacker or Dragoon, we would ban Darius just on the 1-2-3.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a strategy of letting Darius go first game, and now it's your free ban for the next games of the series.
Yep.
So I think there's strategies behind that too. And the more we talk about it, the more like I feel like it's like we're constructing that, like it's become way more chess in the draft than it ever has been before.
In theory, yeah,
Finally.
assuming that everybody's willing to
theory.
use it like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanna get the chance to see the wacky drafts, and we get all LDL on each of the players. I'm also kind of curious, like before we move on or we go into.
We'll close out after this. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, whatever else we have left. Like, I'm kind of curious how this affects the LPL now, because if I'm not wrong, like there's players that are going to go up from that LDL format in this.
There must be. Yeah, I mean,
split.
they got
Like,
16
I
teams.
think
There's no way they're
EDG
not promoting some of these
Yeah,
17-year-olds.
like just for EDG, like I think EDG actually already is a team that will promote like 4 out of the 5 academy players or something like that. So I'm kind of curious how the immediate impact will be on the LPL, depending on how wacky it was and how many players got to play a lot of champions. So going to put an eye on there, because that may be an immediate reflection on what happens with the NACL.
All right.
Might be.
Yeah, I guess time will tell.
Yeah, for sure.
Should be soon enough.
Well, we've gone a little longer than we expected to, so I think we can close on out there. Allorim, thanks so much for joining us, man. Really appreciated having you on and hearing your insights. It sounds like an ACL interview now, which we did 3 of in 2 weeks already. But yeah, last word goes to you.
We had
Anybody
to
you want to
close
shout
the
out?
last
Anything
one.
you want to say?
Nah, thanks for having me. I guess look forward to when eventually the Mirage announcement of our roster gets coming. It should be coming soon. So see what we changed up.
Good stuff. Looking forward to it.
Also,
And
we should get Norm to sponsor the show, so that we put like the logo from Mirage Academy over here, and we just put biased opinions on each of the shows.
Yeah, dude,
what we think about Mirage
let's
Alliance.
just sell out. Fuck it. I mean,
If they, I'm more willing to sell out for a jersey and some like sponsors right here.
Yeah,
we need
you know,
to fill up this
we're for sale.
part up here. Yeah,
could make it happen.
We need to have more recognition. Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, we were, it used to be Team Ambition because we did their streams every split,
True.
and now that's the second Team Ambition reference of this show, and now they're down the tubes. So we'll see. But anyway, this has been the Salt Mine. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back in a couple of weeks once we know all the NACL rosters with our preseason breakdown. But until then, take it easy. Stay tuned to the Twitters for other NACL spoilers, and we'll see you guys next time.